My name is Grace Munger, and in my speech, I would like to inform you of about an issue in our society, which is the decrease of effective interpersonal communication because of depression. Our society has made it a challenge for people to be able to speak about their problems because of the fear of being judged, the stress of society, social withdrawals, and social expectations, etc. Depression is one of the most common mental health conditions in the U.S., which I found from the Help End Depression. It was written in 2021. Depression can be a hard concept to grasp, especially if you've never had to experience it. Most people think if you are feeling sad, then you must be depressed. But depression, it's much more than that. It's something that it's hard to escape, hard to let go once it takes over your mind. If you've never experienced depression, you can never fully understand what it feels like. People do not understand it. They just think if you try to feel happy, all your sadness and loneliness will disappear. But they are entirely wrong. Depression, it's a brain and mental disorder. It is not just the feeling of being sad, but it's also the feeling of feeling hopeless, lonely, losing enjoyment of hobbies that you once enjoyed, which I also found from Help End Depression. No matter how hard you try, you can't to change the way you feel. You can't. It feels impossible. Depression takes control of many people's lives in ways such as it's affecting their ability to communicate. Most people struggle with talking about their feelings and admitting they have a problem, which makes them go suffer in silence. I am one of those people. It is very difficult for me to admit that I have a problem and that I need help. I have been struggling with depression since January of 2024. I do not like to talk about my feelings, and it makes my sadness much harder to deal with. I think it's a pride thing for me mostly, and it could be that way for others too. Society has made people believe that depression is a sign of weakness, which makes people stay silent when suffering. Although that's what society thinks, I think differently. I think if you are brave enough and confident enough to admit that you have a problem and that you need help, then that shows nothing but strength. I am not at that point where I am brave enough to do that, but hopefully I am one day. If you are one of those people, I truly admire you. Depression can easily ruin relationships because people who are suffering feel like they cannot get their feelings across, which leads to them feeling misunderstood. The feeling of being misunderstood can get people to go quiet, which affects interpersonal communication. Now that I have talked about the basics of depression and my thoughts and experience on it, let's dive deeper and get more specific on how it impacts interpersonal communication and free communication. The problems of depression cause, and the solutions to solve these problems. The damaging effects of depression on society. Let's talk about how depression impacts free interpersonal communication. Free interpersonal communication is the process of exchanging words, ideas, feelings honestly without any sort of judgment, which I found in a website written by Tara in 2025. These thoughts and feelings could be exchanged verbally or non-verbally. Tara in 2025, for example, it can be translated verbally through face-to-face communication by observing the tone of voice, body language, facial expressions, etc., which I also found from Tara in 2025. With that being said, someone who is struggling with feeling depressed can also struggle with the ability to apply interpersonal communication to their everyday lives. Most people do not really see how much feeling depressed reduces someone's ability to communicate. There are times where people feel isolated because they do not know how to deal with their feelings and do not want others to feel bad for them. This leads to relationships becoming hindered and sometimes even ruined. Now let's talk about the negative effects depression has on interpersonal communication. There are many negative effects that depression can do to people. Negative things that depression can do to people. If you fail to communicate your feelings, it may cause issues in your life on top of the ones you are already dealing with. For instance, it can ruin relationships. It cause people to become more lonely. It can make it harder for someone to get better. And lastly, it can diminish the amount of support you have from others, which I found from a website written by Collier in 2024. Let's dive deeper into those concepts so they are more clear, so you have a more clear understanding. The first point I mentioned was depression can ruin relationships. This is because a loved one may get a feeling of frustration when someone who is feeling depressed because they are not emotionally available when their loved one needs them, which I also found from Collier in 2024. They can become very distant, which may cause their loved ones to feel like they're being unheard and rejected, which I also found from the author Collier 2024. Now on to the second topic that I mentioned above. It is not that being able to communicate effectively when feeling depressed can cause you to feel more lonely. This is because you cannot communicate with people. If you cannot communicate with people, they cannot help you. This could cause people to feel more isolated because they do not feel understood, which can cause them to just isolate themselves more. The third point I made was that it could make it harder for someone to get better. This is because if they do not reach out for help, nobody can help them. They want to be able to help themselves before anyone can. Help them. This is the hardest part of the healing process. I know that if nobody can help me, if I'm not willing to talk about my problems, but I still cannot talk about them. It is way too difficult for me. I think for most people it is a fear of being weak because you are having those sad thoughts, so they just bottle them up because it's easier to talk about them. At least that's how it is for me. Therefore, I feel that is a big part of how depression affects communication. Lastly, my final point on this topic was that the fear of not being supported by others when you finally communicate your feelings to them. I think people struggle with this because they are scared how someone will react. I think that maybe they think that people won't believe them or that they won't help them get the help they need. They may think it's a waste of time to even bring it up because nobody is going to help them deal with it. Now that I have discussed the problems of depression within interpersonal communication, let's go over those solutions to those problems. Some solutions to these problems are that you can try to be an active listener when someone is opening up. You can encourage them to open up. If you are feeling depressed, then you can seek professional support and talk about mental health more. And make it feel normal to talk about, which I found all those points from the Mayo Clinic written in 2023. Now that I have given a few ways to solve these problems, let's go into more depth into each one. The first one I mentioned was to be an active listener when someone is talking about their problems. So let's start with that one. If you are involved when someone is talking about their depression, then that person will feel more comfortable and open up way more. Ways you can do this is look at them when they're talking, ask questions, make them feel comfortable, support them, and give them tips on how to help them from feeling the way they do. My second point I made was to encourage them to open up and talk about their problems. There are many ways you can do this, such as letting them know they're not alone and they do not have to deal with their problems alone. Make sure that they are aware that bottling up emotions is only going to make them feel worse and uneasy and sad. Maybe as a friend or a loved one of one that is struggling, you could try to encourage them to seek professional help, which I also found that from the author Collier, written in 2024. Remind them that social support and interaction is a very important step to getting better. Just be encouraging toward them in any way possible. I know that it is normalized that seeking help can be embarrassing to some people, but in most cases, that's the best way to recover, which I found from the Mayo Clinic in 2023. Depression can be hard to understand, so having professionals help can be very beneficial. The last solution I came up with was to talk about mental health and make it a normal topic to talk about with the people you care. The more you talk about it, the easier it is to open up about it. Make sure people know that it's not embarrassing to feel depressed and that it is even less embarrassing to talk about the way you are feeling. I believe that if these solutions were normalized, then depression would have a less negative impact on interpersonal communication. I think we can all agree that depression does have a strong impact on interpersonal communication. It can lead to many bad things that I have mentioned in my speech. As society we can try to support people with depression and make them feel like they can talk about their feelings, then it would definitely help the negative impact it has on society. Communication is a big step in recovery. So we as humans need to do a better job in helping communicate when feeling depressed. Thank you.